Is there anything you find important about sustainability, finance, innovation, transformation, the future that we haven't talked about yet?
It is the combination of identifying strategic needs and then doing things. We are always struggling. So we have a lot of roundtables, but roundtables are roundtables. From roundtable to action, that's the big topic. We need to use our time on this planet to do something reasonable. I don't expect this from everybody, but everybody who has the energy should be encouraged to do something significant, at least from the perspective of a single individual.
Klaus, I'm very excited to have you on the Core Impact podcast. And the first question I would like to start directly asking you is, you spent years focusing, researching, speaking on sustainability, change, innovation. What is your inner motivation? Why do you do this?
Yeah, thank you, Omar. And it's my pleasure to be part of this podcast series. Like it very much. It's an unscripted podcast. It's a good conversation podcast. It's not like this typical podcast where you have kind of framed conversations. So my motivation was an evolution because, I have to go a little bit back. I'm a chemist. I studied chemistry. I worked in big industry. I tried to find new crop protection products, new chemistry to protect plants from pests and diseases. And I was always thinking I'm 100% right in what I do. And if people criticize, they just don't know. Then there was a very big moment of learning for me when there was a huge debate about a certain type of products of my former company, which was alleged to kill bees, pollinators. And I was becoming kind of a spokesperson for the company. So I was joining a lot of conversations with people who had a very different view. And the biggest learning out of this time is that the truth is very often very gray. So it's the industry says we are right, the others say we are right. And if you're in the middle of this conversation and you try to listen to everybody, you figure out that it's more complicated. It's always more complicated. So simple truth, especially if you claim science as your foundation, you need to acknowledge that if you go on science, science is very complicated. To say, these products are safe and those products are not safe, that's too superficial. So I was in those conversations and I tried to listen to people who were blaming the industry for doing really bad. And then I was trying to go back to the industry and said, well, I don't challenge the principal things we do, but the way we present ourselves, the way we talk about things, and sometimes also the way we think about our own products needs some adjustments. And what I learned is if you go into those conversations between all kinds of people with different positions, the best is you acknowledge that you are not the source of wisdom like the others are not the source of wisdom. And then you can start a conversation, and it requires the willingness of everybody to listen. And if you do this and you ask yourself, for example, in agriculture, which is one of the biggest game changers in our world in terms of are we having enough food, but also how are we dealing with our planet? Do we need to change things? And we had this very tough discussion at one point of time in the company when we ask ourselves, well, we need a sustainability strategy. What needs to change? Do we need to change something? And then if you look at hunger around the world and you look at the business models of the big ag companies, which are focusing on corn and soy, that's not feeding the world. That's feeding the cheap meat eating world to a large extent. There's more feed than food, actually. So that you need to focus more on smallholder farmers, that you need to supply different products for smallholder farmers and not only for big agriculture. This is one of the elements that we took into focus. And at the same time, we also realized we can't exclude the environmental conversation. We cannot say that we have nothing to do with biodiversity loss and climate change, because of course, agriculture is one of the biggest impactors of biodiversity loss and climate change. So this was a tough learning phase because you go really deep in what does it mean, the business I'm operating in, what are our impacts? And I was at that time really proud that we were setting quite ambitious targets. I would say industry-leading targets, including a target to reduce the environmental impact of the company's pesticides, which has been a taboo before to even say that there's an environmental impact. So that was a big move. I understood at that time, I realized we need to change the way we think. We have to think integrated. We need to think in systems. Not everybody can say, okay, I have this product. What can I do? It's just a product. There's many other products as well. What is my product doing in the bigger context? And everybody has to make a contribution. And the bigger the company is, the bigger the contribution has to be. So I think that was like, for me, a changer. And then I realized, how can you move a company? Who is putting enough both pressure, but also incentivation out? And that's the finance world. If the finance world doesn't drive these type of things, if investors only say we don't like your company because we hear all these bad things, but I talk to these people, I say, it's very nice what you say, but it's in your hands to change it. It's in your hands to change it, because if you set out targets, but you need to connect the targets and that the companies achieve those targets with investments, like decisions. It has to pay back for a company to make all these investments in different technologies. It's in your hands. So that was the point when I realized sustainable finance is very important. The third point, what I realized, and then I make a pause, is...
Before we come back to the conversation, I would like to share something personal. I've already published 40 podcast episodes with leaders in leadership, AI, sustainable finance, and the future of work. This episode is number 41. For now, I will take a break to reflect before beginning something new. If you have listened to any of the episodes, I would really appreciate your feedback. My intention is to create content that is meaningful, practical, and enjoyable to listen to.
In Europe, there's a very strong thinking that all has to be regulated. It has to come from the regulators. What I realized is, when the regulators discuss how shall we redesign sustainable finance, they don't know. They don't know neither finance nor the technology side. They are regulators, so they need to get strong input. And if the input is not taken up in a good way, they come to completely bizarre regulations, which in the end lead to construction, which is more stimulating business to simplify reporting than sustainable technology development. I was at a conference 2 years ago when the Green Deal was still in full swing, and there was not the flip back yet visible. And then it was called a sustainability summit. And everybody was only talking about, and here's another AI tool which helps you to simplify your reporting. And I had my freak out moment on stage when I said, how can we be in a sustainability summit and only discuss how can we simplify the reporting, which has become so complicated? This will not save our planet at all. So I've lost a little bit confidence in the power of regulators to do it right. I think that they should not get into the way. They should not be those who prevent progress from happening. They should set maybe the right incentives, but the incentive cannot be that if you meet all your crazy reporting demands, you are still in business, otherwise you're out of business. That's not incentivation, that's punishment, and punishment is not stimulating. So I think the interplay between finance and technology is where the magic happens.
Klaus, you started by saying the truth is gray, or it's not like black and white, it's always in the middle. And I heard this again and again, and then I was reflecting on it, like people who are working in sustainability area in different fields, they say, I want to make the world better. And this is also, I feel like it's a very general, broad, vague statement for some people that they don't understand what to do with it. So since you talked about investors, why should investors care about sustainability from also a financial point of view or risk point of view, not only purely as a moral issue?
Yeah, I agree. And the moral hammer doesn't anyway work globally, because we have different priorities. So if you look at sustainability and you have a conversation in Europe, everybody only thinks about the environment. If you come to India, the social dimension of sustainability plays a much bigger role because the need to feed enough people or have sufficient amount of food in the country is much more in the presence of people's thinking. So the Europeans, they sit on a tremendously high horse and they judge about the rest of the world and how everybody should treat the environment. Well, I mean, we should first start. I'm always a fan of look first at your own forest. Are they okay? They are not okay. In Germany, the forests are horribly bad. So before you point fingers on others, clean up your own shop. That's number one. So I think the standards, the moral standards, are complicated, especially when you always use them in the other territories and not in your own. So this is why I think it's not working over moral claims. It's only working over the triangle of people, profit, and planets. Europeans think it's environment sustainability. People in Asia have a more social dimension. People in North America have an economic view on sustainability. I had a conversation with a farmer in the field in the Midwest, and I asked him whether his farm is sustainable from his point of view, and he said absolutely, because I'm in the 8th generation on my farm. So it's obviously sustainable. So economically sustainable. So I think once again it has to be balanced out between people, profit, and planet. Without profit, unfortunately, there's no sustainability. It means if you run a business and you put it in conditions which will like put your business case at very high risk in a very short period of time, this will never fly. You will not get the money. No one wants to invest into something like this. So my speech to investors would always be, we need to find those models which give you a decent profit. Maybe you take a little discount on the maximum profit short term. Because you invest into long-term endeavors, you will have a higher return on investment later. You may not have it in the first quarter. Yes, I think that's a perspective which may be true if you change for good for long term. Also, it still requires a lot of work in terms of how to measure those impacts, which are out of the financials. Financials we have learned over hundreds of years, 100 years, let's say, how to measure a company's financial success. We have all the KPIs, we have all the numbers ready. But for the other parameters, which are, I would say, not, I wouldn't even call them non-financial, but they are more semi-financial because they all have a financial impact mid to long term as well. But to measure them in an accurate way and in an aligned way, that this is the turmoils that we are in. And while there was 10 years ago, it was a hype to set up new, rules, and you need to report this and that and everything. And then it became visibly too complicated and it was not agreeable globally. And I think this is what we need to sort out quickly. We need the investors' help. But my call would be, it would not be stop thinking about profits, the investor. It would be thinking about long-term profits versus very short-term profits. And this is why I like to talk to investors coming from insurance companies, for example, because by design, they have this longer-term perspective. If they think about insurance, for them, climate change is a risk that they can already feel. I can change the world, by the way. I can't, and I don't even dream of it. I want to make positive impact where I can, and I want to talk to those people who are willing to join. This is my recipe for luck. It's not the big dream of changing the world because for me, it's too complicated. I prefer I can do things which have a measurable impact in my area of responsibility.
Klaus, there's something you said. I think it's very important to be aware what words are we using. When you said, I don't like to call it non-financial because it look like this. And many times when I read ESG reports, for example, sustainability reports from companies, I see the concentration sometimes from the beginning. We have donations in this area and that area. We did this. We volunteered with this initiative, etc. Okay, this is not what I would expect maybe you can mention it somewhere, but it's not like the main focus on the sustainability report.
I agree, because it's not impact, right? I mean, sustainable business or sustainable business transformation should take your business from a place which is good to a place which is better in terms of people, profit, planet. So you really need to show that you do something impactful. Donations are important, and I don't want to diminish anything around donations. They're very important that companies play a role and that they give a good example as social members, as members of a society, as citizens. You have a responsibility. And the way you use donations, there's very different traditions depending on in which country you operate. There's legal requirements or no legal requirements. So it's very different from depending on where you are coming from. But typically these things are local. If you are operating in a global company, you are making local donations for certain communities. Very important that for the local acceptance of a company where it operates, that there's an acceptance of this company where it operates. But it's not enough. I mean, that's not the business transformation that we have to talk about. So there are two different things which are both very often under the roof of ESG or sustainability. But I have a different understanding of ESG than this. My understanding of ESG is that this is a term from finance which helps investors to better understand how the company translates the sustainable business strategy into a financial framework. That's what I understand ESG really means. So those are elements, donations are elements, especially in the social of ESG. So you engage. But in the end of the day, if you have a sustainability business strategy or sustainable transformation project, you want to show how you are making a significant change with impact. And with ESG, you demonstrate to the finance world that they can trust you because you report in a reasonable way, in an understandable way, in a measurable way, and in an aligned way with them, that they can trust you what you do.
Klaus, maybe you can start with defining what do you mean in short, like 1-2 sentences. What is sustainable business transformation for you? And then you can tell me in the last 12 months, what have changed? What new ideas do you have?
Yeah. So I'm working in the field of agriculture and life sciences. And for me, what it means is that we come to approaches in agriculture from the input and the uptaking sector, so along the whole value chain, that we produce enough food while we constantly reduce the negative impacts on the environment. So the big question is, how can we feed the planet without starving the planet? That's the question. In a nutshell, for me, that's a big sustainability question in agriculture, which is one of the biggest areas that we need to have a big watch out for. So, and you may transfer this to other industry sectors as well easily. How can we produce what we need in sufficient amounts and at prices which are affordable for people and not only very few people, while at the same time we don't significantly harm the environment? And how can we do it at a business model which is attractive for companies to go forward and to move, and for investors to invest into those models? That's sustainability for me, and sustainable transformation, because in agriculture, we have to confess, we are not there. We have too much harmful impacts. We still have hunger. So we are not there. That's very clear. So we are losing biodiversity. Climate is heating up. We have desertification. In the last 12 months, when I started to have a bit less work on the political arena, but more on working with startups, working with really innovators, working a lot in India with a fantastic company, which is really trying to change the paradigm, I realized that the core of the whole agricultural discussion has to be the soil. So we discuss all kinds of parameters, all kinds of things. Yeah, and the yield. I mean, if a company says we are doing sustainable agriculture, it is good for soil, it's good for farmers, it's good for yields, it's good for all these type of things. And it should be regenerative, and regenerative is good for years and it's good. No, regenerative is not good for years. Regenerative means that the environment can recover from what you do. That's regenerative, right? It can regenerate. You do something on the field and then it can regenerate. And I think it's very important, super important that you are honest and like with your definitions, because otherwise you dilute them and you don't make progress because you still do what you have done before. So you say, yeah, we need to focus on 5 things. One is yield, very important. So we have incorporated in our definition of regenerative. And the soil is not doing better, but okay. The soil has to improve. And if the soil improves, the climate will improve, biodiversity will improve, yields will improve, everything will improve on the long term. And in order to have better soils, we need to change the way we do agriculture. There's a systemic need for a change. And it goes away from, I'm working in agriculture, I need to maximize my input business. I need to sell more X, can be a pesticide, fertilizer, seeds, whatever. It has to come to a different view, like I need to maximize the outcomes. And I need to define my business models over outcomes rather than inputs, which is very complicated, of course, because much easier to say, I want to sell so and so many kilograms of insecticides or tons of fertilizers, rather than rethinking agriculture in a system approach that I say, I want to give the farmer a solution which enables him to harvest X, Y, Z, while having no additional costs on his environment, even maybe gains. Integrating insurances, that's a completely different lens of looking at a business. And, many industries struggle to reimagine their business, going away from input into systems, from systems into outcomes, and from outcomes into a different type of offer. And then they will immediately tell you, it's not possible. The supply chain is too complicated. All these things are too complicated. And the farmers want to make their own decisions. Of course, they want to make their own decisions. But everyone is going digital. And I think this is making the big companies like Google and Amazon different from others, that they don't think, why is it not possible? They only think, how can we make it possible? How can we bring an outcome business model into agriculture? And this will come. That makes me very confident that this will come. The question is, what will the old companies, which role will they play in this new world where the farmer logs on Amazon agriculture, whatever, Google agriculture? Google knows, or whatever the company is, they know where the field is, they know the soil conditions, they know the neighbors, they know the crops which have been planted in the last 3 years, and they can make a recommendation for everything the farmer needs, including the machines that he needs. And then they can even offer him to drive the machines if he wants to. So what role are the old companies playing in such a world? Is such a world a desirable world where it's only in 1 or 2 companies' hands to steer what's right and wrong, what farmers do and don't? Very complicated, but this will come, and it can bring a significant sustainability push if the right parameters are included in these algorithms. Does it make sense what I say? For me, it's important to rethink input towards outcome-driven business models, in a nutshell.
Klaus, if you take now a longer span or range, not only the last 12 months, but in general, if you can think about the whole sustainability movement, let's say, from the last 5 years and also to the next 5 years, how do you see the development? How do you see or perceive what happened in the market until today, and what do you expect in the next 5 years?
Yeah. So if I look back, let's say not only 5, but 7, 8 years, there was a huge hype. And I have to say, Greta did a tremendous job in creating this hype where suddenly every CEO wanted to shine next to her in Davos on stage, like, I'm the most sustainable guy. I have better commitments than my competitor. I'm faster carbon neutral. I'm doing more on these sustainability. So there was like an avalanche of sustainability commitments. And of course, there was an immediate movement, and you could see it in Europe. There was a strong in favor. In Asia, it didn't land that quickly because people had other problems. And in North America, there was a huge skepticism from day one against all this. Huge. And many people call it greenwashing. And whether it was greenwashing or not was what the next 5 years showed where we are now, because in some cases, it was simply greenwashing. Companies were making nice commitments, and then in the moment the pressure was reduced because the public pressure was reduced, they were not on the public, or maybe even individuals, leaders who wanted to connect their own story to this sustainability transformation, and then they retire and the next guy comes and then it's gone. So there was quite some reason for the skepticism. And the next phenomenon was then called green hushing, which is before you start with tremendous splash and then you just silently disappear. Greenwashing. I think we are in this moment of consolidation where nobody wants to see people making big statements, big commitments. The competition on the biggest sustainability commitment is over. That's good, because it was going too extreme and then it was not accompanied by enough action. However, at the moment, with the current crisis around the world and all the wars and all the political hiccups that we have and significant changes on international collaboration, we are falling behind again. So at this point of time, everybody in Germany discussing the fuel price is too high. Okay. Yeah, it's okay. But on the one hand, there are wars. You discuss the fuel price while there are wars and people are dying. That's already complicated for me. The other problem is that economies are really coming down. People are getting out of work. They have imminent issues to solve. And for them, all these topics like biodiversity loss, climate change, they go on priority C, D, or E. So we came from like too much into too low. So what I hope is in 5 years, we recover from this, because we remember that our children and our grandchildren don't want to live in deserts. They want to live in good climatic conditions. They want to have enough food. They don't want to live in an environment which is destroyed, but they want to have also like a good life and they want to have decent income. So we come back to a mid to long-term perspective. We are not making crazy politics in terms of over or under ruling what needs to be done. We come to, there is maybe a dream, but from too much back into too low, we come now as a lessons learned, we come to the right framing from political side back to the understanding in the industry that we can't wait. We can't wait. I mean, every day we wait and we do the wrong things is terrible for our grandchildren. I have 2 grandchildren already, so that's my hope for the future in very high level terms. What it requires is a significant effort of everybody to come together. Industry, finance, first of all, regulators, okay. I wouldn't rely too much on regulators, but we need to sit together and we need to redefine the money flow to where the future of all of us should be. And I hope this is working. And also, I would say, for example, in the Sustainable Investor Summit, which is the biggest in German-speaking area, the biggest event for investors coming together discussing exactly those topics. It has been growing every year, so there's still a high interest. There's a very high interest in this topic. It's much less visible.
Okay.
It's much less visible. And in the US at the moment, you can continue to do the right things, but you better don't call them sustainable, because that word already has a negative touch. You never mention ESG in the US. It has a very negative touch. In Asia, that's still different. Very different. And we need to remember ourselves, where are all the people living in Asia? Many more than in the US and Europe together. So this is where the impact will be in the future. New economies are coming up. I see India and China driving many things while we still think they are behind. They're already ahead.
Many questions came to my mind, follow-up questions, like apart from what I wrote here, but one of them is also a reflection, or also curious what you're gonna give it a number. Of course, it's not a study, it's more a feeling from your expertise or your intuition, if you want to reflect on this. So I had a Professor Christian Klein as a guest
I know
also,
him.
if you know him. Okay. I remember we were talking in general about the interest on sustainable finance and sustainability in general. He said it was, in the past, it was like, let's say, 8, if you give it a number just like this, 8, the interest, and then there was, before 2 3 years, it was 100, and he said now it went down to maybe 14 16, and he says in the future it will come back to 50. So it's gonna, it has this up and down. What do you think about these numbers from your intuition?
Yeah, I think that's the same message which I just tried to give. I mean, we were going from too low to extreme, then back to too low. And I think we need to come to reasonable. In the moment, people go and become almost religious about, your business has to be like this and that. If you come to an American farmer and give him a lecture about how he has to do it differently from the past, nobody wants to be lectured. Brazilians don't want to be lectured by Germans. Yeah, nobody wants to hear these like almost like religious lecturing. You have to do it like this and that. I think there must be collaboration, but not like imperative steering. And there was too much of this imperative steering. There was too much of moral claims. There was too much of these, like, you're really bad if you do it like this and that. This is creating counter movements logically. And I think if we learn the lessons, then we will go into an open discussion. Open discussion means, and this is I have a nice example, if I may share this. Very ideological is a discussion between organic and conventional agriculture on both sides. Organic agriculture claims to be much better for nature and all these type of things. Conventional agriculture says, yeah, but you are not bringing enough yields. You are not producing enough food. Right. If you look at where the origin of this discussion is, it's not an outcome-based discussion. It's a discussion whether you use tools for agriculture which either come from nature or from synthetic. For me, it makes completely no sense to have such a discussion between organic and conventional agriculture, because they are really good tools which come from nature, yet you can use in agriculture. And there are also very bad tools which come from nature. And the same is true for synthetic. You make the wrong discussion about something which is so important. You have a discussion between very ideological camps. And one of the reasons why this is because it's politically so simple. It's always simpler to classify inputs than to discuss outcomes. So you say everything from nature is good, everything which is synthetic is bad. That's European thinking. It's incredible, because whether you produce something in the lab or it comes from nature, for me, makes absolutely zero perspective on which is the better one from a sustainability perspective. 0.0. But 0 also means that not always synthetic is better. But you can use synthetic to optimize negative features of natural products. Also, you can use synthetic features not only to optimize efficacy or yield, you can also optimize pollinator toxicity, reduce pollinator toxicity with synthetic tools. So I think there is a slight understanding that just traditional agriculture is not enough to feed all of us. In Europe, it's coming, that we need new tools. If it's not chemistry, because synthetic is such an unwanted term, maybe it is like new breeding technologies. GMOs also really bad, but maybe new breeding technologies can really help, and they have to. So I say that could be part of this. We get out of the extreme good and extreme bad discussions into something reasonable. We have learned lessons from failures in the past. Let's stop talking organic is better or conventional is better. Let's say regenerative was better, which means what you do is producing enough food, but nature can recover from what you do. And just as a last statement, everyone who says, I have a biodiversity positive agriculture, lies. Because the only system which is biodiversity positive is nature. And in the moment you try to grow only one crop in a field and don't want to grow whatever, if you don't let it grow as it wants, you reduce biodiversity. So people who make these type of claims, I do biodiversity positive agriculture, these are things where we need to start to be honest and transparent. It's an initiative that we took in the company I worked before in that we really provided access to all data that we did that was necessary. We become honest. We share what we do. We say, this is the good thing. This is the downside. We can never say safe, everything is safe. That's not possible. We cannot say everything is good, everything is bad. That's not possible. We have to talk about the risks and the benefits and the best outcomes. That would be wonderful. And then we would get out of those ideological conversations, which are driving the extremes.
Now, as a reflection while listening to you, I'm thinking how much when the focus is too much on structure, on putting things into boxes, you want to do sometimes the right things too much. You want to be a perfectionist, for example.
Yes.
Then it has the other effect, because then you don't know exactly what are you putting in these boxes. And this is here come back to being right or wrong, or good or bad for the environment, or so many other terms that you put like black and white. This comes back what you said in the beginning, that truth is gray.
I think AI can really help us. Yeah. I think it can really help us to figure out better balances, better compromises. It's all about compromises. As I say, you want to grow something, you reduce biodiversity. Here's the first compromise you have to make. Do you want to grow on a very small field a lot with very high intensity? Do you want to grow on a larger field with less intensity? In any way, you reduce biodiversity. Maybe even on the larger field, to reduce more for the same yield, because you take a larger space away from nature. So, I mean, these are very complicated conversations. What I think would be really nice is if everyone understands where its own share can be and make a serious effort on this. For example, having this discussion on biodiversity. How is biodiversity impacted on a farm in Iowa? What shall the farmer say? I mean, how can you measure this? And then, because you want to have an answer, you come to very simplified KPIs, which are far from capturing reality. So I think it would be really nice if, and we are working on this, I'm working in the Minor Use Foundation, where we want to establish a platform where we want to have the best methodology being established, which helps to describe the environmental impact of a single pesticide application. That would be very concrete. So if product A has this, and this, if it's up to latest science, and if it's based on the understanding that not even this model is perfect, even though it's only targeting a pesticide application, so many impact factors, so many numbers you need to consider. Is it about earthworms? Is it about pollinators? Is it about all kinds of things, soil constitution? So many things to be considered. But if we could add more concrete, if we would work on the individual puzzle pieces, those who can, rather we all discuss the whole puzzle all from morning to evening, and we don't have the capacity to puzzle a good puzzle because we are lacking the competence. Then we can put it in a very good way together, and I'm completely convinced that AI will help us. AI is so much smarter than myself. I'm every day a little bit surprised, knowing that there are huge pitfalls, of course.
Yes. What surprised you the most with the whole development of the sustainability regulations?
The two extremes. First of all, how extreme it went in Europe when they were designing the so-called CSRD, and the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, we had conversations even before they were putting it in front of the European Parliament. As a company, I was invited to comment. And there was a part when it was written down that there's the double materiality analysis that companies have to do. And for a company which is working in the ag input sector, there's no question that biodiversity is in scope. So you cannot say I'm working in an agriculture company, but biodiversity is not material. Of course, it's absolutely material. Then you reflect relative to climate and carbon, which is also material. Where are we in terms of maturity of measuring this? And I would say in the space of climate and carbon measurements, we have 20 years of intense development. We are not perfect yet, absolutely not perfect, far from the financial maturity, but we have a framework that we can use. Biodiversity, we are like super unexperienced, but it's already factored in like carbon. And if it becomes mandatory to report on it, the CFO is in charge. He is basically legally obliged to deliver the right numbers. On how can you deliver the right numbers if the measurement framework is not clear? And then I was reading one of those drafts of the CSRD, where they said, a company where this is material has to report on its biodiversity impact of its products up and downstream. Scope 1, 2, 3, up and downstream. And I was just imagining, what if the representative of Bayer or any other input company for the annual report has to knock on the gate of the farmer in Iowa and say, Joe, I need your biodiversity data for my annual, because it's downstream. I mean, that's crazy, okay? So there's millions of farmers. They would all have to feed into something which would just accumulate a Mount Everest of data, which is absolutely not helpful for any investor to make any better guided decision. That was the first point when I was like, this has been designed by people who are excellent in theory, but have no connection to reality. No connection. Doesn't make any sense to make something like this. That was the first surprise. The second big surprise came, what I already mentioned, after then suddenly, because it became clear that nobody can do this without building like huge departments in the company. I mean, separate business now do this reporting. In an annual report like this, the finance will be 10 pages and the other numbers will be 1,000 pages. This doesn't make any sense anymore, but it will build a huge business. So there was an understanding as too much. But the flip back that was then presented by the European Union and the Commission, which was basically from one day to the next day taking again out 80% of companies from the obligation to report, I think that sent a very, very bad signal into the rest of the world, because if the Europeans are not serious about it, I think that had a tremendously negative impact. So it was like, okay, now even the Europeans got the message that this doesn't make any sense. And of course, that did not stimulate neither in North or nor in South America any, so I think both was really not well done. The first was too much, and then from too much into so less, created a global understanding that, okay, if the Europeans are stepping back, there's no need to pay attention to this anymore, at least in certain geographies, certainly. And it was basically also feeding the narrative of like, no, they got the message that this is not important for those who wanted to hear the message. Yeah. Once again, we always come to this. It was too much, then it was not enough, then too much, extremes from one extreme into the next extreme. I think it's very important before you go into something really, really significant, at least you consider the impact. You have to make an impact assessment before. What is going to happen if you do this? And if you don't do this properly, you create such a mess. I have to say, I like working in India. I work in Canada. I also work with some institutions in the US. And of course, I work in Europe with a number of institutions. And there are many groups with impact and power who really want to drive the right things. If I may mention Farm Credit Canada, I have the pleasure to work with Farm Credit Canada, which is an organization in Canada which is providing financial inputs into the entire food production. I mean, this is a wonderful group of people. It's a wonderful country. They have a lot of land. They want to do the right thing with the land. They want to have a future approach. They have the capability, they have the stamina and the power, and they just launched an initiative which is called Let's Grow Canada, which I think is really that's how it works. It's like finance and industry and producers come together and say, let's do this in the right way. Let's do it right.
Klaus, there's another thing that I'd like to hear from you, since you've worked across different cultures and you mentioned now many different countries. So what did you learn most from leading projects across these different cultures?
That's a separate podcast, Omar. What I learned is, but it comes back to what we discussed before, is how much do words matter? How much do words matter? It's so important to use the right words. Also symbolic things. Even emojis on WhatsApp are understood differently by different people. So I wanted to send it to a really nice colleague in India. I wanted to say good luck emoji. So I sent a 4-leaf clover. And she was like, why do you send me vegetable things? And I was laughing. I said, in Germany, everybody knows that means best of luck. So, I mean, if you come to work in a different country, and that's a very funny little example, but of course there are much bigger misunderstandings. If I work in a different country, it's my duty to understand. It's not their duty to understand me. It's my duty to understand the local rules. The German way works very nicely in Germany sometimes, but typically it doesn't work so well in Latin America, doesn't work in Japan, and doesn't work in India somehow. So, I mean, understanding the cultural backgrounds, and you really need to go back a bit more into cultural learnings. If you're interested, for me, is a gift that I have the chance to work in all those cultures, and because it gives you like free access to incredible learnings in each of those countries, that you, before you start talking and telling them what you think is the right thing to do, you need to find out why are things going the way they go, who uses power how, what are the mechanisms of decision making, and stop thinking in categories of right and wrong. Doesn't make sense. This is now the country where it's right. If you do it the other way, it's wrong. So that's it. It's wrong in the country. You will not come to the good outcomes. This is why I also teaching students in the university. It's a wonderful chance to work in a big corporation. If you have the chance to work around the globe, can be in a big corporation, can be in other places, but that's for me the biggest gift in my professional life, was that I had the chance to make friends around the globe. And you can only make friends if you accept that they are very different. Not accept, if you enjoy that they are so different, that they have a different way of thinking, they have a different way of talking. And another very nice example, I also use it very often with my friends in the US. It leads to a lot of misunderstandings and due diligence processes. I'm very convinced of this between Europeans and Americans, because Americans are saying the word great every other minute. It means nothing. It means okay. In the US, great means okay. But the Germans here, when they hear the word great, they hear exceptional. Because we would, if you go in the dictionary and you see how great is translated into großartig in Germany. Großartig, we say twice a year maximum. So yeah, we don't say that word. We say okay, we say good, but we don't say großartig. We don't say great. So I gave that feedback to my friends in Washington when I said, imagine a conversation where you talk with your friends at the evening over a drink, and you replace every great by exceptional. in your conversation, how does it sound to you? And they were like super crazy. And this is how we hear you. This is how Germans hear Americans. In our ears, they are exaggerating all the time.
Mm.
While in their ears, we are understating all the time, because the word good is really not good. It's even below. And I had two leaders. One was coming from very German leader. If I made a presentation, he said, Klaus, good. That was really the best you could get.
Mm.
Then I had another leader coming from the US. And if you would have given me like Klaus good, it would have been really bad feedback. So you need to understand this. And if you have ever been in the UK, where the same word can be used in 20 different meanings, like interesting. Interesting can be from crap to good. You need to even listen to the context of how the word is used. So this is the secret journey that you need to go on if you work in different cultures. I have not been working in your cultural environments, which I regret, because I know it's culturally extremely rich. There would be a lot to learn for me. But my gift is, and now that I work so much in India, I can tell you I have learned so many interesting things about this country, which were very, very new for me. It was for people of my age, crossing the 50 was like a medical treatment to reset myself again out of my common environment.
In India specifically?
In India, that's where I went. Could have been probably another country too, but in India was like a treatment, because everything was different. My coordinates didn't apply. The way I did things, I had to put on pause and learn how it's done in this country, which is very nice. It stops you from complaining all the time. It prevents you from complaining like many people do when they get a bit older. And then if you put yourself in a new environment, you have to learn. So that would be if you're already in the moment of the podcast, like as an outlook, I would say try to do whatever you can, make your share to a better world, but understand and respect that others have different perspectives.
And this is actually what I'm learning. This is one of the reasons why I like to do the podcast, and each episode I have a new guest, because every time, even if we talk about the same thing, everyone see it a bit different. It doesn't mean that they are one right and one wrong again, and one see it black and white, but there are so many colors then you can see in the conversation. Let's say, what advice would you give someone who wants to be a change maker in embedding sustainability in business? What are the things that they should focus on going forward?
Yeah, there's a couple of critical success factors, I would say. I think you should, depending on how big the company is, let's say it's a bigger company, you should find some allies first. I mean, you should have a lot of conversations, and don't go as a priest around and tell everybody what's right and wrong. Go into a lot of conversations and find people where you think I have some like-minded thinking here. So you need to have this. And you also need to find a sponsor in the upper management, someone who is willing to think with you in this direction, at least. Maybe not even to act in the beginning, because maybe he or she doesn't want to be the actor in the moment of truth of a transformational move, but maybe you need to find some people who understand where you come from and why you think like this, and who support it to a certain extent. Then you need the second element is not every moment is suitable. So you cannot do every big move at any point of time. You need to have a good moment for this. There's always windows of opportunities opening up. And very typically, honestly speaking, it's crisis. A crisis is opening an opportunity always, because in a crisis, there's a higher acceptance for change than in very stable conditions. In very stable conditions, no one wants to change. No one wants to change. Oh, it's working. Why do you want us to change anything? Nobody wants to understand this in moments of massive pressure, crisis moments. These are the moments, and that's why I say these are winners of opportunities. They open and close because typically crises come and go. If they stay, it's really bad. But I mean, typically a crisis comes and goes. So the traditional recipe is that, a big company would say, let's not be too visible now. Okay, so this will go away. That's one approach, and it's the traditional approach. But in the moment you want to do a transformation, you want to say, my company has to change something significantly, or we want to change something, and I have a really profound idea how this could be done. A crisis is a good moment when maybe the CEO needs something to say, which is significant and is catching the interests of people who are even on the other side or very critical. If you can give in this moment something like, this is well thought through, this is how we could do it differently, that could be a very good moment for a bigger move, because the pressure, it's a combination of pressure and the like-minded people. You just need to accept that you will be in the minority because otherwise it would have happened already. Big organizations are not very, they are not very fast. They are not ships that you can turn by 90 degrees in just one move. It requires capacity building, it requires coalition forming, and it requires preparing for the right moments. And then it requires courage to really do it. And you go in the beginning always against a large majority of people who say, no way, no way, no. A little bit of courage is required.
I'd like to reflect on like some key points you said here. That first of all, to be aware that the moment of crisis is where you find more opportunities, and then to be okay with not being so, let's say, famous. You will be a minority, especially when you talk about changing or talking about transformation, because most people are resistant to change, and which is something normal. In the end, to have the courage to take action, which is something now we are talking about a broad statement. Everyone knows where and how and in what situation they can do this. Thank you for this reflection. There's another thing also in kind of the same direction, which is I'm curious to hear from you about. Where do you see the biggest new opportunities for professionals, especially that you work across different, let's say, domains? We're talking about sustainability, change, innovation, AI. Where do you see the most opportunities in the next decade? We are not talking about only today. Like something, if someone is building something new, do you see any new opportunities or trends or things that maybe people are underestimating now, but will maybe even something that haven't been yet, something will exist in the future?
I come back to what I have described, but maybe describing the product which could be at the end of such a development is that a farmer has a tool that he can use, which is providing him all the services that he needs to grow on his land with the best outcomes in terms of he has a profitable business. He is protecting his soils. He's improving his soils. In a system like this, where all those tools are basically bundled by that company which is providing the digital service to the farmer, I think new tools will come up. If I think about startups, and if you think about the current crisis, for example, that we have this shortage on synthetic fertilizers, soil improvers, biostimulants, these type of things, which have not been the traditional way of the big industry thinking, but they are coming up, and there will be a lot more space, that you help nature to recover, that you help soils to recover much faster. And it's not contradicting my message on organic, but there's a lot of learnings we can take from nature in how we stimulate our organisms in the soil, microbes, microbial interactions, root stimulation, all these type of things in a much better way than we used to do in the past. You need to have an understanding of the complexities of soil. You need to have an understanding of how a plant that you grow is interacting with the soil, what it takes and what it gives, which determines to a certain extent what the next plant should be. And I think with AI, you can really understand this whole system much better, and you can build business models much better based on the system, which will come to much better agricultural outcomes in any dimension, not only in terms of environmental protection, but also in terms of yields. I believe this. This is hard to believe today for people because they live in the system today, which is heavily based on synthetic fertilizer and significant crop protection. By the way, the industry always says crop protection, which is we protect the crops. The others who don't like it call it pesticides. And they say this is really bad because it has all these negative impacts. But of course, it's another example for it is both. It is protecting the crops from aphids and whatever, worms and all kinds of pests and diseases. But of course, it has certain side effects. How can we minimize those side effects, maximize the positive impacts, maximize soil fertility? Understanding this whole thing as a system, I think AI will be essential to get there. And then we will see a new industry, a completely new industry. And then it will be tough, but I think we are in this moment of transformation in Germany. Chemical industry is under heavy pressure. Car industry is under heavy pressure. We haven't talked about cars. It's not my specialty area, but I'm surprised if I talk to my kids or to other younger people, they cannot imagine a world without where they buy a car. It's like, of course you buy a car. I said, that's because you have such a fixed mindset that the only system you can imagine is cars. I mean, I see, fortunately, many things are moving and you see more like you can have shared use and all these type of vehicles you can use to drive faster, better. But it's so fixed in our minds that cars must be there. Maybe in the future, there's different transportation possible, and this everybody has to drive a car, which is making such a big mess on our planet. Super unsustainable will also go away to a large extent. I would wish this. And will this have a big impact on German industry? Absolutely. Is it a reason not to think differently? Absolutely not. Yeah. It is interesting how also the young generation is, of course, has been grown up in where they are, and how it's very difficult to reimagine. Reimagine. What if cars wouldn't be there? What would we do?
Thank you very much, Klaus. By the end of the podcast, I ask you a question from a previous guest. The question that I got from Sabina was, every action creates a reaction. So how can leaders become more aware of the reactions their actions create?
The question is how can you be more empathetic to the person that you talk to? And I think empathy is something that there's a portion of it which is either you have it or you don't have it. There are people who are extremely empathetic without having any lessons or trainings, and others need some more feedback. And now comes something which is very boring, is this, we need to have a super good feedback culture in our company, and then we do a training for feedback culture. I think you need to have leaders who give strong examples. I think if you have leaders who are not giving these examples, whatever trainings you have in the company, there's no strong feedback culture. I think the companies are the most powerful companies where you have open discussions, but then the leader has to show significant empathy, especially when somebody is challenging him or her, and appreciate it. And that's very often not the case. My answer to the question is definitely not do systematic feedback trainings in the company. That's a checkbox exercise, and it doesn't go deep enough. The answer is empathy. Select empathetic leaders, support empathetic leaders, be empathetic, be interested in the person you talk to.
Hmm.
But And we are in a very general area, because how can you create empathy? I have no easy answer. Maybe you have an easy answer, Omar. I don't know.
I don't know if this is the answer. There's always different answers. Um, I think starts within myself first. If I listen to myself, if I lead myself, if I know how to listen to my body, to my needs, to my heart, then it's gonna be easier for me to listen to Klaus, for example, and his needs, and then I can do it with others more easily when professional setting or in general in life. Yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Very good. I mean, there's a maturity dimension in this. I mean, I want to give the credit to everyone who's 20. That's the moment. It's not necessarily the moment when you are in the best listening mode. You are in action mode. That's fine. I think at one point of time, I wish when I'm a real old grandpa, I just listen to my grandchildren and I enjoy.
What is the question that you'd like me to ask a future guest, Klaus?
After all what we discussed in this podcast, my question would be not very creative, but it would be actually in this triangle of how we drive sustainable transformation through regulating, innovating, and financing. What is the strongest axis between those 3 points, and how can it be supported even better? Maybe that's the topic for your next podcast anyway, but that's what all my thinking is centered around. How can you get the money to really drive these new ideas to that place that they have a good starting condition? It's the balance in the triangle, which I think sometimes is so out of balance, and then it doesn't work. But there's, once again, I wouldn't expect a good answer or a conclusive answer on this, but maybe a reflection on where do we need to put our efforts more on? More on regulation, more on innovation, and how do we get the money to that place? I don't know. I'm trying this every day, but I have not the golden key yet.
But at least from what I understood from you, that you don't have much hope in regulations, right?
Not too much.
Yeah.
No, because it's volatile.
Yeah.
It's volatile. The Europeans have given this example, and in the end of the day, I hope we are on a very local downtime of international collaboration, and we will come back to much better international collaboration soon. But this is where we can't wait for the politicians to come back to reason. We have to take action now.
Now, is there anything you find important and relevant to everything that we talked about: sustainability, finance, innovation, change, transformation, the future, that we haven't talked about yet and you like to mention in the end?
I think I have been walking through my world of thinking and acting. I think it is the combination of identifying strategic needs and then doing things. Where we are always struggling. So we have a lot of roundtables, but roundtables are roundtables. From roundtable to action, that's the big topic. And I can only encourage everybody, like Carpe Diem. I like this movie. I love this movie, Dead Poet Society. You're probably too young for it. I can only recommend it to everyone. We need to use our time on this planet to do something reasonable. At least if we feel we have the energy. I don't expect this from everybody, but everybody who has the energy should be encouraged to do something reasonable, something significant, at least from the perspective of a single individual. And that would be my encouragement is carpe diem and do something.
The last question I would like to ask you, Klaus, is how do you celebrate success and life in general?
I was with my family at the Dutch coast yesterday, my wife and my children and my grandchildren. These are the best moments, but also once again, I mean, if you plan celebrations for a long time, typically you have very high expectations and something goes wrong and then you're disappointed. That's the same like if something really good happens, enjoy. If you have a really good idea, like a really good idea, that's just a moment to enjoy. Or if you have like a breakthrough, I'm personally not somebody who's celebrating a lot for what I did. I'm too impatient with myself. The moments of joy about things I achieve are fairly short, but I think it's more important not to celebrate yourself, but others. Recognize others. Recognize when others do something really good. So if you're again working in a big corporations, celebrate your team, celebrate your people, build strong boundaries to your people, be interested in your people, support your team. In the end, that's your legacy. That's everything which remains is the respect and the love and the respect and the love of the people that live and work with you. And not necessarily of your bosses or bosses and talent list and whatever. What remains is how you work with people and how you support people.
Thank you very much, Klaus. I really enjoyed the conversation and I like this diversity of topics that we talked about, from sustainability to agriculture to also understanding different cultures and sharing experience, looking at the future, talking about regulations. I really enjoyed the conversation and now I don't have anything to add or any more questions. I'll just give you the space if you like to say any final thoughts before we close.
My final thought is, Omar, I wish you best of luck for this podcast. Bring different thoughts together. The more maybe people are a little bit out of the mainstream, the more interesting the podcast is. So I wish you best of luck and I thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you, Klaus. Congratulations for listening until the end. You are in the top 25% of listeners. Studies show that we forget up to 70% of what we hear within 24 hours. But when we repeat an insight by sharing it with someone, commenting, or journaling it, it moves into long-term memory. So now tell me, what are your 1 to 3 takeaways you're keeping from this conversation? Enjoy every moment. Until next time.